In the dead of night, when the moon hangs low in the sky and the trees creak with an otherworldly chorus, there is a sense of dread that permeates the air. It is at this eerie hour that I find myself walking the long, shadowy corridors of the old prison where I work. The walls seem to whisper secrets of the past, and the faint echo of long-forgotten cries fills the empty spaces. As a new guard at this decrepit institution, I am constantly on edge, my senses heightened by the palpable sense of unease that hangs over the building like a shroud. There have been rumors among the staff of strange occurrences, doors slamming shut on their own, lights flickering inexplicably, and the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing down deserted hallways. One night, as I made my rounds, I heard a chilling wail emanating from the cell block. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I crept closer, my footsteps echoing in the empty silence. What I saw next froze me in my tracks. A ghostly figure, clad in tattered prison garb, hovered in the dim light, its eyes hollow and vacant. I felt a cold sweat break out on my brow as I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure seemed to beckon me closer, its spectral form wavering in the dim light. With a trembling hand, I reached out to touch it, only to have my fingers pass through its icy form. The ghostly presence before me seemed to speak without words, projecting images of unspeakable horror and despair into my mind. I could feel the weight of its anguish pressing down on me, a suffocating terror that threatened to consume my very soul. As I stood there, paralyzed with fear, the ghostly figure began to fade, its luminous form slowly dissipating into the darkness. I was left alone in the empty cell block, my mind reeling with the implications of what I had just witnessed. From that moment on, I knew that this prison held dark secrets beyond my wildest imagination. The spirits of the past lingered in the crumbling walls, their restless souls haunting the very air I breathed. I could feel their eyes upon me as I went about my duties, their spectral voices whispering in the shadows. Each night brought with it a new terror, a fresh specter to haunt my dreams and raise the hairs on the back of my neck. I saw things that defied rational explanation, shadows that moved of their own accord, voices that whispered in languages long forgotten, and doors that opened and closed with no apparent cause. One night, as I patrolled the cell block, I heard the unmistakable sound of weeping coming from one of the empty cells. My skin crawled with unease as I cautiously approached the door, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. As I peered inside, I saw a young woman huddled in the corner, her face buried in her hands. Her sobs echoed through the empty cell, a mournful lament that chilled me to the bone. I tried to speak to her, to offer some comfort in the face of such profound despair, but she paid me no mind. Instead, she continued to weep, her form flickering in and out of focus as if she were not entirely corporeal. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized that this woman was no ordinary prisoner. She was a ghost, a lost soul trapped in this decaying prison for eternity. I backed away slowly, my heart racing in my chest. The woman's cries followed me as I made my escape, their haunting melody lingering in the empty corridors long after I had fled. From that night on, the prison seemed to come alive with a malevolent energy, its dark heart pulsing with a sinister life of its own. Shadows darted in the corners of my vision, whispers echoed through the halls, and the air itself seemed to thicken with its passing hour. I knew that I was not alone in this place, that the spirits of the past walked among us, their spectral forms haunting the very fabric of reality. I could feel their eyes upon me as I went about my duties, their unseen hands tugging at the edges of my sanity. One night, as I made my rounds, I heard a voice calling out to me from the depths of the prison's bowels. It was a guttural, inhuman sound that sent a chill down my spine, a cold hand of dread clutching at my heart. I followed the sound, my flashlight casting long, twisted shadows on the walls as I descended deeper into the darkness. The air grew colder with each step, a tangible sense of fear pressing down on me like a weight. As I rounded a corner, I saw a figure standing in the shadows, its form obscured by the dim light. I called out to it, my voice quavering with unease, but received no response. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end as I approached, my heart pounding in my chest. As I drew closer, the figure turned to face me, its features twisted into a grotesque mask of rage and despair. I stumbled back in horror as I realized that this was no human being. It was something far more malevolent, a dark entity that should not exist in this world. I could feel its eyes boring into me, a soulless gaze that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of my being. I tried to flee, to escape the clutches of this abomination, but found myself rooted to the spot, my limbs heavy with fear. The entity before me seemed to feed on my terror, its twisted form growing larger and more grotesque with each passing moment. I could hear the sound of its voice echoing in my mind, a chorus of anguished cries and whispered threats that sent a shiver down my spine. I knew then that I had stumbled upon something beyond my comprehension, a malevolent force that had its roots in the darkest recesses of the human psyche. I could feel its presence in every shadow, its breath on the back of my neck, its whispers in the empty silence. As I stood there, paralyzed with fear, the entity before me began to advance, its twisted form unfurling like a nightmarish flower. I closed my eyes, unable to bear the sight of this monstrous apparition, but the image was burned into my mind's eye with searing clarity. I felt its icy touch upon my skin, a cold hand that sent a shock of terror racing through my veins. I could feel myself being consumed by its darkness, my very essence slipping away into the void. But then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the entity vanished, leaving me standing alone in the empty corridor. I could hear the sound of my own ragged breath echoing in the silence, a forceful cadence that seemed to reverberate through the very walls. As I made my way back to the surface, my mind raced with 1,000 questions and a million fears. What had I encountered in the depths of that accursed prison? Was it a figment of my imagination, a trick of the light, or something far more sinister? I knew that I would never find the answers to these questions, that the truth of this place lay buried in the dark recesses of the past. But one thing was certain. I would never forget the horrors that I had witnessed, the terrors that lurked in the shadows, and the ghosts that haunted the crumbling walls of that forsaken institution. And so, as I emerged from the prison's depths, my heart heavy with dread, I knew that I could never truly escape the darkness that had consumed me. The ghosts of the past would forever haunt my dreams, their mournful cries echoing in the empty chambers of my soul. And I could only pray that I would find peace in the light of day, away from the prison's malevolent embrace.